Hey, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Man, thank you so much for being on the Dessie show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Man, it was so great, like that we were able to connect so fast, and definitely shout out to both of our networks for putting us on together. So,
Yes.
yeah, for people that don't know, please tell them who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Camille Alleyne, and I am a NASA rocket scientist. That's where I'll start.
So cool to be like, they like. I'm sure you've always heard the expression. Well, it's not rocket science,
Always.
and so I'm sure that's like the running joke in your industry. So, so please talk about how you got first introduced into that field and how you went so far. Because I see so many different. I know you have so many different degrees. You always repping HBCUs, so that's really great as well. So
Yeah.
just kind of get into that story.
So I was born in Trinidad and Tobago. Let me start there. And as a kid, I was just fascinated by the night sky. I remember at the age of like 6 or 7 years old, I would sit every night on the trunk of my dad's car, just stargazing and not having a concept for what space was. It was just like I was fascinated by the blackness of the night sky. So
Yeah,
put that aside. Um, in high school, I was really good in math and science. And as a young person, my parents always stressed education. My mom always said, I'm the last of three girls. So
okay.
she always said education was the key. Like we needed to focus on education. And so I was this little girl who around the house, I would be like breaking things down and building them back up. And I
Yeah,
always say when things broke around the house, my mom didn't call my dad. She called me to fix it. Right.
yeah.
So even from a very early age, I had this very analytical mind.
Okay.
Right. In high school, I went to an all-girl high school and I was really good in math and science and loved those subjects. And so, it was time to decide, well, what do I want to study when my sisters had already migrated to the US. So
Okay.
I knew that was like a natural progression for me.
Yeah.
And so I was deciding, well, what do I want to go study in college? And I remember back then, there were only like five professions that were really like, people knew about being a
Yeah.
doctor, being a lawyer, being an accountant, being a teacher, and being a nurse. And
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to do any of those.
Uh-huh.
But we had a family friend who was an engineer. Trinidad is really big into petroleum. That's
Oh,
our main actually export.
okay.
Um, and so he was a petroleum engineer. And I remember thinking, I don't know what an engineer does, but I know that's something different.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I remember asking my mom, did he make a lot of money? And she said yes. I'm like, I'm doing
That's
that,
it.
you know? And so I had to decide, okay, what type of engineering? There's so many different types. So I was really good in chemistry. So I said, maybe I could do chemical engineering.
Okay.
Of course, petroleum engineering would have been natural because it's Trinidad.
Right.
But I had this love for planes because
Okay.
we flew a lot as a kid traveling up to the United States.
Yeah.
And so I decided to study aeronautical engineering. So I migrated to the States to
Mm-hmm.
start studying how to design planes.
Yeah.
And then something happened in my freshman year. The Space Shuttle Challenger blew up,
Mm-hmm.
killed the 7 crew members on board. And
Yeah.
that was like an eye-opening moment for me. Like before that, I didn't know there was a thing called a space shuttle because I was in Trinidad, didn't know. I
Right.
didn't know there was a place called NASA. And I didn't know there was a job of being an astronaut. And in that moment, I decided that's what I want to do.
Oh,
I
yeah.
want to design rockets. I want to design spacecraft. I want to work at NASA. I want to be an astronaut.
Yes.
And 6 years after that, I was driving into the gates of Kennedy Space Center to start what has been a 26-year career, designing, developing, testing
Yeah.
rockets and space systems. And,
That.
you know, I came from this small dot in the Caribbean Sea to
Yeah.
being on the front line of the U.S. space program.
Yeah, and that's so amazing because not only is it, you're talking about NASA and outer space and things like that, but also talk about, being able to break barriers because I know there's not a lot of people of color and there's even fewer women of color in these type of programs. So please speak on that as well.
Well, it wasn't an accident that we only heard about the human computers, people like Katherine Johnson and Mary Vaughan, the Hidden Figures
Yes.
4 years ago, 2016.
Yeah.
And these were women who back in the 1960s, like paved the way for me to be able to do what I have been able to do. I am clear that I stand on their shoulders, and
Yeah.
they paid the price because they weren't treated very well, even though they were pivotal back then
Yeah.
in NASA accomplishing its early mission of human space flight.
Yeah.
So it has not been easy. Of course, we're talking a lot about racial injustice and systemic racism. And throughout my career, it's a white male dominated field, right? So I as a Black woman, have always had to walk in these very white spaces where
Yeah.
I'm the only one who looks like me. And it's not always easy. You got to bring your A game.
Yeah.
I'm very educated, not by happenstance. And you have to go, you have to give 150, percent for sometimes half of the recognition. So, but for me, I am living my passion,
Yeah.
and I am clear that I stand as a role model and I represent for all the little ones coming after me. And I don't take that lightly at all. I have dedicated my life to inspiring and empowering and encouraging young women,
Yeah.
especially of color, to not be afraid to get into science, technology, engineering.
Yeah, and I really love that because being that you're at the forefront of that and understanding that exposure. Because as you said, when people of color grow up, they don't think about all these different opportunities. They only think about a few. Like where I'm from, of course, they're always thinking about, okay, can I play basketball? Can I play football? Can I do music? Something from the entertainment level.
Yeah.
But amazing that you were able to navigate that through science and math and things like that, and inspire. I know at one point we're doing a lot of charity work in that same field, working with young women of color that are interested in that field, right?
Yeah, I started my foundation about 13 years ago. I was at NASA headquarters, which is in Washington, D.C.
Okay.
I was working there. And I remember looking around and realizing, one, how far I had come, how much I had accomplished at that point in my career, but also that there were no little ones who looked like me in the pipeline.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I had the opportunity to go to Kenya. And it was with an organization that would go into secondary schools during the summer and help the students see how the kind of really theoretical stuff they were learning in school around science, physics, and chemistry, that
Okay.
they had really practical applications. And so
Yeah.
we would do like experiments with them and stuff. And I remember making such an impact, especially on the young women that I met there and how much they impacted me, that
Yeah.
I came back and that realization, it was like, you know what, I to whom much is given, much is required, right? And I have always wanted more people of color in the conversation on space,
Yeah.
and more countries that represented people of color, because it's always been the US, Russia, Japan, Europe, and Canada, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted like African countries and South American countries to be in that conversation. I realized the only way to do that was through education.
Yes.
So I founded my foundation, the Brightest Stars Foundation, to educate, empower, and inspire young women around the world to be future leaders. And I have traveled the world over the last 9, 10 years. Been to many, many, many countries and touched the lives of tens of thousands of young people. I mentor one-on-one. I probably have about 20 proteges now that I mentor from 10 countries around the world. We get
Yeah.
on Skype or we get on Zoom. And, I encourage them, whether they're in high school. I focus a lot on high school girls because that's where actually you're kind of making your decision. What do I want to major in college, right? And it's important to take the right types of courses and stuff to set yourself up for success. So I focus on high school. I focus on mentoring young women in college. I mentor guys, young men too, but I'm overwhelmingly focused on women. And then space professionals. There are not a lot of us, even not just in the US, but globally.
Right.
And so I serve as that mentor, that role model for young women who, are pursuing careers in space and in STEM.
Yeah, and then I also wanted to ask, because I know you're really into space travel as well, and then also on, I guess, like space cars or things like that, or whatever you call it, I guess.
It's space vehicles.
Yeah.
So right now, actually, my role at NASA is I manage. So NASA, on behalf of the U.S., is primary goal to go back to the moon, go forward to the moon, our lunar exploration goals, and to send the first woman and the next man to the surface of the moon. First time in 50-something years, right? Since the Apollo program.
Yeah.
By 2024. But prior to sending humans, we are going to send science instruments and experiments because there's a lot we don't know about the moon. There's a lot the moon could teach us about our solar system and the origins of our Earth. And like we're always looking for those answers. Yeah. And so I manage that program that works with commercial companies, these commercial space startups, that can deliver our instruments to the surface of the moon, something like FedEx. It's like a FedEx delivery to the moon. And I'm leading that program on behalf of NASA. So, yeah.
Yeah, and when you talk about just going into space, period, how many, I guess, people of color have even been into space? I know it's not a very big number at all.
No. By the way, I am not an astronaut. I was very close to being selected a few years ago. I was a finalist, one of 100 out of like 5,000 applications that year. And they selected 12, but I wasn't one of the 12. So I have not achieved that goal yet. I hope one day to achieve it, maybe as a private citizen. But no, we have not had many, I think probably less than 12 African Americans. And in the world, we've had about 500 humans travel to space. So, it's a really, really small number of African American astronauts that have had that experience.
Yeah, and talk about the experience with you said it was about 100 out of 5,000.
Yeah. So every so often NASA puts out a call for astronauts, and they actually have an active call going on now, because they want to select their next class of astronauts next year. So this year, this was about 10 years ago, I had applied. I had been applying, and this particular I applied.
Yeah. And
there's this process of 5,000 applications. Last year they got like 18,000. It was crazy. Thank God I didn't have to compete amongst those many people. But they go through and they select the most highly qualified people out of that. And they select 100. And that 100 you considered a finalist, and you get invited to interview. They do extensive medical tests because, you have to be really healthy.
Right.
And you do some robotic training and some spacewalk simulation training. And then they do the dunk selection. And so I was one of that 100 to experience. I mean, it was amazing because I knew at that point I was qualified to fly in space, or
Yeah.
else I wouldn't have gotten that far. And it was just a matter of, the medical test and, do they see you as a great team member? Because it's all about teamwork and
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that was a like profound experience. And I
Mhm.
realized out of that, even though I wasn't selected, that when you have big dreams and
Yeah.
you are determined and focused and you work hard,
Yeah.
anything could happen. And it was the journey for me, not the destination.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely, and that's really really good for people to kind of understand that that you may not always reach it, but you
Yeah,
learn so much in working through things.
exactly.
Yeah, and I know you mentioned being in DC. I'm from Texas, so we were always familiar with the one with the NASA, in Houston.
That's
So,
where I am now. I lived in DC, but now I live in Houston. I've
oh,
been here 13 years. So I am that at that one Johnson Space Center here in
oh,
Houston, Texas. So
yeah.
you are from Houston?
No, well, I'm from Greenville, which is an hour east of Dallas, but I
Ah,
spent a lot of time in Houston
yes.
working for business.
Okay.
Um, so I need to like come down there and really like tour the facility and things.
Absolutely. I will be delighted to give you a personal tour.
Man, yeah. So look, I'm really happy about that. Let me control. Like yes, but
Yeah, I know somebody on the inside.
a rocket science. So. So talk about kind of what's next for you and where do you want to continue to further your career to?
So what's next? So after 26 years of government public service, um, I am putting plans in place to start my own company,
Yeah.
my own space company,
Oh,
and get into this commercial space game. Um, and that is a space where not a lot of us, actually very few of us are represented too.
uh-huh.
There's all these space startups, and none of them really have any like black CEOs or black founders and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
so I would like to change that conversation and change the narrative around, what it means to be diverse, what it means to be inclusive and have an inclusive and diverse workforce,
Yes.
in the commercial space game. And I think the time is right. I think so many people were inspired a few weeks ago by the SpaceX
Mm,
launching our astronauts for the first time by commercial companies. Because
yeah.
before that, it was always either the US government or the Russian government that
Hmm.
built these vehicles and launched our astronauts to the space station. And
Yeah.
then for the first time in history, we had, SpaceX as a private company
Right.
do that. And I know it captured the imagination of millions of people around the world. And so there's this new excitement around space,
Yeah.
and what it means to be able to build a private company and achieve some of these goals that were just too cost prohibitive prior and only governments could do. So I
Yeah.
would like to venture into that space, and just again show what's possible to people of color around the world.
And with that, I know you mentioned that now, or I don't know the way it works, but people want to go as astronauts, but if they don't get the opportunity, now it seems like they're trying to sell slots. Side.
So there are a couple of things going on, not with NASA, but with commercial companies.
Mhm.
Virgin Galactic, for example, the Virgin company owned by Richard Branson, everybody knows, billionaire, has a space company called Virgin Galactic. And what they're doing is building a vehicle that can skim the Earth, like skim the Earth's atmosphere. So you get a 3-hour flight in space, relatively,
Yeah.
just skimming the Earth's atmosphere. And so that's open to private citizens at a cost of about $200,000 or $250,000 or something. But they
Yeah.
have a lot of people in line
Right.
once they start being operational. So that's one aspect for private citizens. And then, once now SpaceX starts flying regularly on behalf of NASA, their vehicle is going to be, it's a private company.
Yeah.
So they can actually sell seats. It's going to be millions of dollars, but
Yeah.
they can actually sell seats to private citizens to actually go to space, like to go to the space station, which is orbiting 400 kilometers above our Earth. And so we're in this era where space travel for private citizens is becoming a real thing.
Yeah.
And it's exciting. If
Yeah.
you afford it.
I guess the more experience that people have and the more that we learn, that is what allows you to, I guess, bring the cost down.
Exactly. Well, what brings the cost down is competition.
Yes.
So having more companies like SpaceX doing what they're doing is going to drive the cost down eventually. But it's hard. It is hard. What they have accomplished, I can't tell you. It is hard. And kudos to them for being able to, have reached as far as they've gotten in their development. But yeah, it inspires other companies to come online and try to do the same thing. And that's what's going to drive the cost down long term.
Yeah, and then going back to where you said, like almost like the delivery service type. Was it Pizza Hut that was able to like deliver a pizza or something like that? It was some kind of.
Oh my God, there was was it Pizza Hut or there was another company that sent something like cookies or there was something going on the space station that was sent, and the astronauts I know they had sent cookies and they were able to bake the cookies. Somebody sent an oven and all that stuff. So yes, these private companies are getting into the regular companies that we know every day are now looking to space to see like, well, how could we get involved in the space game and stuff like that. And from a moon perspective, we are literally trying to set up an economy on the moon so that commercial companies can find a marketplace. They could create a marketplace where it's not just NASA that's paying them to send something. They can, any commercial company, any entity, any foreign government could pay them to transport things there too. And that's what creates a market and an economy. And so that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. Okay. So now I have to get into a couple fun questions.
Okay.
So, I got to ask you about what, and I know you can only talk about certain things you may not be able to talk about.
No, I mean, that's fine.
All right. Other galaxies. How do you feel about other galaxies and other life forms and aliens and things like that?
Well, I mean, I think we are all aliens. We are aliens on this earth, right? If there are other life forms out there that came to earth, they'll be like, okay, they are strange beings, right? So I actually don't use that term.
Yeah.
But our universe is so vast, right? So let me blow your mind a little bit. So our Earth is part of our solar system, we call, with other planets, Mars, Jupiter. You learned that in elementary school, right? But our solar system is part of the Milky Way galaxy. And in our galaxy, there are billions of stars, like our sun. Our sun is a star.
Right.
And so there are billions of stars just within our galaxy. And there are billions of galaxies in our universe. So billions times billions is a huge number, right?
Yeah.
So do you not think it is very
exactly,
a lot of hubris on the part of human beings to think that we are the only life form? And it may not be life form as in humans, but life form, like anywhere there's a presence of water and oxygen and the right type of atmosphere, we know life could form. And it could be life like microbial life, for example, of the smallest forms of life, right? And so NASA has a program where we're always looking for what we call exoplanets, other planets outside our galaxy, in far distances from our galaxy, that have the same kind of conditions maybe that Earth does. They are rotating around their sun and they're a certain distance from their sun.
Mm-hmm.
and perhaps those conditions can create an atmosphere where some kind of life could be existing. So
Yeah.
we are always looking, and we've identified over 1,000 exoplanets
Uh-huh.
since we've started that program. And so personally, as a scientist engineer, I know we are not the only life form in the vastness of the universe. It is impossible for me to think that,
Yeah. And then where is it? Mars, that people are always kind of looking at.
Yep.
So what?
I always say Mars is like our holy grail because it's so similar to Earth.
Okay.
And we know there was once existing water there, and
Okay.
they may have had life there. And so we are always trying to, our human exploration program, especially the use of the space station,
Yeah.
is always about how do we understand how humans adapt to space,
Mm-hmm.
and how do we create measures to keep them safe so that we can one day send humans to Mars. Like,
Yeah.
that is always our ultimate goal, right? Is to send humans to Mars. I would say we're not that close.
Mm-hmm.
It may not happen in my lifetime. I hope it does, but I don't, because there are a lot of problems we still have to solve. How we keep astronauts safe from the extensive space radiation they will be exposed to.
Yeah.
How we deal with isolation for those long periods of time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's some other medical space, human body adaptations that happen that we need to solve. But that is always our ultimate goal, is to send humans to Mars ultimately. And actually this year we're sending our other rover, the Mars Perseverance is launching on July.
Yeah.
In July, on the way to Mars. It's a 6-month trip, so it will get there in November.
Uh-huh.
And that mission is for that little rover to start picking up Mars samples and
Mm-hmm.
putting it in little tubes, and it will drop it as it picks up the tube, fills it. It will drop the tube like little footprints, leaving little breadcrumbs. And in the future, we'll have a mission that will go and pick up those samples and bring it back. And that will be the first real kind of tangible evidence we will have of Mars, Mars soil,
Yeah.
Mars samples, so that we really understand, its composition, and was there water there at one time and stuff like that.
Yeah, because I guess when you drop things and then go back and get them later,
Mm-hmm.
compare what's happened to them
Exactly.
over
Exactly.
the time that it was there.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, I get it a little bit. I try to catch on fast. But it's always been so amazing how you've heard so much about Mars and then so much about the moon. So and I know you mentioned it would take, I guess, what, 6 months to get to Mars?
6 months. So what we try to do is the shortest distance between Earth and Mars,
Okay.
when they're closest together, for
Mm-hmm.
us to get from Earth to Mars will be 6 months. So
Okay.
when they're closest together, it's a 6-month trip based on the state of technology of
Okay.
our rockets, engines, and stuff like that. Then we have to wait until it comes back around and it's close again, because
Yeah.
it's in an elliptical orbit. So it's close and then it's far. It's close
Right.
and then it's far. It takes 500 days for that orbit to happen
Mm-hmm.
before it's close again, and then another 6-month trip back. So you're talking about, when we're sending astronauts, it could be almost 3-year round trip,
Oh, wow.
which is not a trivial thing, because
Yeah.
our bodies weren't made for space. Our bodies were made for Earth. We were
Yeah.
developed in this Earth's atmosphere. And so, trying to, understand what these long-term effects on the human body will be, and how do we protect them and bring them back safely. We will never send humans if we can't return them safely. That is our ultimate goal.
Yeah, and then talk about kind of the same, I guess, time for going, I guess, to the moon.
So it's not that, because the moon is not that far. And so it could be a 3-day trip for
Okay.
our astronauts. It was back in the Apollo, based
Hmm.
on the size of rocket we had then,
Yeah.
and we're building something similar now. So a
Okay.
3-day trip there. I don't know if we've determined how long we'll stay on the surface before we bring them back.
Yeah.
But all of that planning is in work.
Okay. And then going back to I guess Virgin Galactic. So so with that space travel, well, that's just going into space. It's not actually going anywhere. Correct?
Exactly. It's skimming the Earth's atmosphere,
Yeah.
just going around Earth and coming back for 3 hours.
Yeah. So I'm interested, like, okay, like what are you actually seeing in that
You
three?
could actually see the Earth.
Okay.
So all those images, you see daily images of the Earth from the space station.
Uh-huh.
Like you could pull up NASA Earth from space and you see all these beautiful images because the astronauts are always taking pictures of the Earth. That's what you will see. You will
Yeah.
see different, you'll see different land masses. You'll see different cities. We can see cities from the space station, especially at night. It's really, really beautiful. You can see, you can see oceans. You can see dynamic events like hurricanes. A lot
Mhm.
of times, when we're having hurricanes, you'll see these space images of the
Yeah.
hurricane, right? So we use the space station. The astronauts are always taking those pictures. And
Uh-huh.
so with the Virgin Galactic, you'll be able to see some of that from that perspective. We
Okay.
call it the overview effect.
Oh, gotcha. And another fun question. So what do you say when there's always a conspiracy theory like, okay, did they actually go? What was it? The moon? Did they actually go to the moon? Was it just a
Yeah.
things like?
Yes, the older folks, the older generation are like, that's just Hollywood, that was a movie set. No, we actually really want, because we have samples. We have samples that the astronauts brought back from the moon that we actually curate here in Houston. And
Uh-huh.
we have vaults of these lunar samples. So we
Yeah.
actually went.
Yeah. So try to get all my fun questions in.
All the conspiracy theories, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh. Yeah, you see whole documentaries on Netflix about it and things like that.
Yeah.
And also with I guess it was like almost a competition on who could get the first person between, like what was it, Russia and the U.S. like back.
Mhm. Exactly. Well, actually, yes, the space race started really well. One, during World War II, with the Germans building the V2 rocket,
Mhm.
intercontinental ballistic missile was
Yeah.
part of the arsenal that the Germans had in World War II. Well,
Mhm.
that was really the genesis of the space program.
Okay.
Right. And so out of that spawned this race, during the Cold War between the Soviet Union at that time, they
Yeah.
were still the Soviet Union, and the United States on who could get to space first. And of course, the Soviet Union beat us with Sputnik, sending this artificial satellite
Hmm.
to space. And then they sent the dogs, and then they sent then Yuri Gagarin, who's the first human to,
Yeah.
to experience space travel.
Yeah.
Was Russian, and so
But of course,
that came out of that whole Cold War.
yeah,
Um,
and it's always funny because we hear about Neil Armstrong and things like that, but we as Americans they try not to acknowledge the fact that we were technically
of
second.
course, and actually, we are the only nation that has sent humans to the moon,
Yeah,
and yeah, so yeah.
yeah. So, but yeah, I won't take up much more of your time, and I thank you so much for being on the show.
You're welcome.
People want to, whether it's support your foundation or any of the efforts or anything like that, please, tell people how they can reach out.
Well, I'm here on IG. You can see my IG handle, Dr._Camille Alleyne. And there I have, I think, a link to both my foundation and my personal website, where you can find all the information about the things I'm doing, the great work we're doing with the foundation and with inspiring young women to be future scientists, engineers.
Yeah, and Definitely going to have to hook you up with Martellus Bennett. He's a good friend of mine, the NFL player. He's really into you know all things outer space, and he's working on a few things for little brown girls. And
Oh, that would be
yeah,
fantastic. I would love to connect with him.
yeah, and he has a daughter, and I have a daughter, and we're each other's daughter's godfather.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
another reason that your story was so inspiring to me is having a little 4-year-old girl and seeing how you know when she plays with certain video games that have space you know with it, and
Yeah.
then when you think about you rarely see like little figurines of black astronauts or
Yes. Yeah.
whatever space.
Yep.
Just you know getting that out there more because at the end of the day it is about exposure and education.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to tell you. Never squash that kind of excitement she has around, you know, this exploration, especially at this age. And
Mhm.
it's really easy when she gets into, you know, just before she hits being a teenager, to lose that interest and to lose that focus, you know.
Yeah.
So it's important as parents to expose our children to all these different things and allow them to explore, allow them to ask questions. There are no dumb questions. And you know, we have so much access to information and knowledge via the internet, you know, really guiding them in finding the right answers and stuff like that. That's what we could do with our girls, especially to
Yeah.
encourage them to keep being excited about science and math.
Right. Yeah. So, and what are some of the top programs or colleges that people could like focus on as far as if they want to get into a career such as yours?
Well, I mean, you know, they're the HBCUs. They don't always have the aerospace
Right.
engineering major, but something like mechanical engineering, because at Howard, I majored in mechanical engineering and aerospace.
Okay.
And so I always tell young people, you know, mechanical engineering is just as great if you're interested in space as majoring in aerospace engineering. It just gives you so many different options because you could do robotics, you could do um, automotive engineering, you know, different things. But of course, they're the MITs, they are the Stanfords of the world, you know, the Caltechs of the world, Duke University, Georgia Tech, for example, is excellent. But
Yeah.
Howard has a great program. Hampton University has a great program. So there are a lot of great universities that have majors in aerospace engineering.
Well, yeah. I'm glad you mentioned Stanford. My son just committed to play football at Stanford. So
Oh, wow.
he
Yeah.
wants to be an engineer, but he wants to be a civil engineer. So
Fantastic. Fantastic. My daughter graduated from Yale. She was a gymnast actually at Yale.
yeah.
And she didn't want to follow in my footsteps. I think she grew up inside of this world around space and she's like, that's your thing, mom. But
Yeah.
she's planning to go to med school. So yeah.
Well, great. Well, congratulations to
Thank you.
but yeah, thank you so much for being on the show. This was wonderful, and I really appreciate your time. So, you know, if you need anything from me, please feel free to reach out.
Yes, Dessie. Thank you so much for having me and allowing me to share my story. And I would love to get connected to your friend who's in the NFL and see what we can do with around inspiring girls.
Yeah, and oh, last thing, when it comes to you know, telling your story, have you ever thought about, you know, film or anything like that? Are you interested in that?
I am, so let me tell you. So one, I am supposed to be starting to put my story on paper. So I have plans to write a book,
Okay.
actually several, but one of them will be my story. And I would love to do kind of what Neil deGrasse Tyson does with like Cosmos and stuff like that. I would love to be his co-host one day. But
Yeah.
that kind of thing, bringing science to popular culture
Yes.
and really, because so many people, you know, Dessie, the thing with this COVID-19 and the pandemic, I know you don't have much time,
No, no,
is
no.
that people are I think they're struggling because it's science.
Yes.
It's all science based, right? And I do so much speaking around the country, and people are afraid of science. They think, well, that's way above my head. I would never understand that. And then they shut down
Yeah.
and they don't even want to listen, right? And so being able to bring science and popular culture and mixing those two, I think will bring science to bigger audiences.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what Neil deGrasse Tyson has done so beautifully. And so I would love to have the opportunity to do that too.
Yeah, so so we're definitely going to connect offline about that as well, because I am into you know, the film industry as well, and I'd love to connect you with some people also on the book writing side. I think Walter Mosley just checked in. He's a good friend of mine.
Okay, hi Walter.
And so
I admire him so much.
yeah. Yeah, so we will definitely, you know, have to connect the dots in that way as well. I can see you doing a podcast. I can see you doing so much, but
I love communicating about science and space. Like,
yeah.
it's something that comes really easily to me, and being able to take this high technical information and like bring it down to
Yes.
where, you know, where people could understand is I love doing that. So yes, that would be amazing.
Yeah, then I look forward to connecting with you offline, and looking forward to that tour too. So you said it on here, so
let me know when we're still working from home, but when we open back up, for sure, when you're back in Houston, please don't hesitate. I would love to give you a tour. It's fascinating.
Absolutely. So,
and I see all my friends here from Club Quarantine. Hi guys, love you guys.
but yeah, well, thank you so much, and
thank you, Dessie.
great day.
You too. Bye bye.
Bye bye.